Welcome back, everyone, to GGN. This is part 2 for today, for Monday, October 14th, 2013. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.com. On YouTube, my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. Blah, blah. All right, so for HARP status for North America, the current long-wave frequency magnitude readings are pretty much low to medium. They're pulsing mostly Texas and the surrounding area or surrounding states. It's a low over here, all the way up into the Midwest, the plains, and everybody else is basically nothing. Moving on to the UK or Europe, they're getting basically moderate or moderately basically pulsed, and Western Europe, including especially the UK, probably coming out of there. Then of course you have Australia, and for the most part pretty low, and at a 3 level over there in New Zealand and South Australia. As far as the chemtrail forecast systems, this was this morning, this was this afternoon. See these two fronts moving in, actually connecting tonight, evening, early night, just getting thicker, probably because it keeps spraying. But it's basically moving eastwards, of course. But once it unites, it kind of creates this little line, little front there. That's on Tuesday, but they're saying by Wednesday, the Northwest will actually have a new front coming. Probably they're spraying off the coast there, and it'll pretty much be cleared up for the Northeast and parts of the upper Midwest, but the South is still going to be pretty slammed. Talking about hotspots, I've mentioned Yemen, I've mentioned Africa, especially Somalia, and South America, i.e. Venezuela and Brazil. And I saw this, right, because you remember they were dismissing embassy representatives from the U.S. They were kicking them out, and the U.S. did the same thing. Venezuelan Navy escorts seized U.S. chartered oil survey ship into port. Crew remains in custody from October 13th. I think this happened on Friday, but a U.S. chartered oil exploration ship seized by the Venezuelan Navy in Caribbean waters disputed with neighboring Guyana arrived in Venezuela. They held the 36 members, including U.S. Citizens, 5 of them. They said the ship was conducting unauthorized scientific work in Venezuela's exclusive economic zone. The vessel was conducting a seismic study for Anadarko Petroleum Corporation. The U.S. ship armed with guards detained at Tuticorin, no papers authorizing possession of arms. The Indian Coast Guard on Friday intercepted and detained a vessel belonging to the U.S. base firm off the coast. It says the crew and guards have not been able to explain why they have entered Indian waters. Semi-automatic weapons have been found on board of the ship, but sources say the crew has failed to produce the necessary documents required to carry such weapons. Brazil's actually had some provocateuring going on as far as the teachers' protest, calling themselves anarchists. So you can see the seeds being sown there for destabilization, possibly intervention. Then Brazil announces secure email to counter U.S. spying. I have covered this before by creating their own secure email system to shield the communications from spying from the U.S. and other countries. But it looks like they're going to actually move forward with it. Kerry leaves Afghanistan without troop deal. He claimed major progress in negotiations. I remember hearing this on the radio over the weekend to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan beyond 2014, but left the country this weekend having failed to finalize the pact. Then Iranian Jews urge Obama to seize on Rouhani overtures. Remember I said one of the largest populations of Jews are in Iran. Tehran's Jewish community has urged the U.S. president to seize an unrepeatable opportunity to mend fences with Iran now that a moderate holds the Islamic Republic's presidency. This is something kind of crazy. TSA loudspeakers threaten travelers with arrest for joking about security. They're reporting threatening messages coming from loudspeakers of the TSA, broadcasting warnings that people will be arrested for making jokes in the presence of the infamous federal checkpoint agents.
Do not be persuaded by strangers or individuals you do not know well to take articles aboard your flight. You are also reminded that any inappropriate remarks or jokes concerning security may result in your arrest. We appreciate your cooperation while these measures are in effect.
I don't have much more news here. It's going to be less than 10 minutes, but just I already covered this before. Germany outlining new strategy for a European army. So, European army is what they want to create, planning combine air force with the Netherlands and the Czech Republic. They want to be used as building blocks, a small group of countries whose militaries work together for a pan-European military power. Russian commandos trained for Arctic combat. The Russian Army Special Forces units have had their first training sessions in the Arctic warfare under plans to boost the country's military presence in the region. It's an experimental program simulating combat in the polar regions and the mountainous terrain, combat training missions involving elements of mountaineering in the conditions of the extreme north are a new experience for the reconnaissance units that normally train in the mountains in southern Russia. The drills include practicing survival techniques such as finding potable water and food, setting up camp, and covert movement through inhabited areas. But they're also trying to just boost presence overall. 2 Arctic brigades will be deployed in the extreme north over the next few years. Arctic airfields and establish a permanent naval presence along the important northern sea route. There's a lot of resources, of course. France wants action on Central Africa's sectarian poison. So, they said on Sunday they're aiming to drum up international interest for a largely forgotten crisis that risks dragging Paris into a new intervention. And why? Because they had a coup there, and it said here that there's a lot of poor people, right? It's got to help the poor people, despite resources ranging from gold to uranium. So they have to go on and sell this as a humanitarian thing. You cannot ignore the conflict of refugees that are going to come in your country. What about the rapes and the murders? If you don't do anything, if you don't allow France to send troops into Africa, then you're not humanitarian. You're an unempathetic piece of crap, I guess. That's the way they put it. Then to Yemen. Yemen separatists reject dialogue and hold on to secession. Thousands of separatists demanding secession take to the streets of Aden to mark anniversary of their 1967 independence of the former South Yemen. They're basically denouncing national dialogue. These talks are part of a transitional process stipulated by a UN-backed initiative brokered by neighboring Gulf countries, the same ones responsible for the chaos in Syria, which ended it, blah, 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 right? So, an article I need to find, I covered it recently, which was about Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was actually attacking these southern secessionists. They actually killed like 5 or 10 of them in a bomb, in an attack. You always have to remember that theme. Wherever the globalists want to go and exploit their resources or whatever, create refugees, they're going to send Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's September attack targeted a joint Yemeni-U.S. drone base. The Yemen branch of Al-Qaeda, basically, which is going to benefit the U.S. and the central Yemeni government said on Monday that its attack on Yemeni army base last month targeted an operations room used by the U.S. to direct drone strikes against militants, and it threatened more such assaults. So I'd imagine that many of these drone strikes are actually being carried out on the rebels, the people that actually want their autonomy. So they say Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is regarded by the U.S. as one of the most active wings of the military network, posing a serious threat to Western interests, including oil tanker traffic, because you have to remember what you're talking about. Yemen, you're talking about right there by the Gulf of Aden. So, that would be a non-ally right there, kind of like Somalia. Those are both trading ports. So if those people were able to regulate and police their own waters, then they would actually be able to help out their people, but they don't want that. Which is why they have to either be in chaos or have puppet governments there. Well, it's not Al-Qaeda that's posing the serious threat. It's the rebels getting secession in the south that's posing a threat to Western interests. So you might see intervention. Who knows? I've heard reports about Marines there as well, and getting armed and funded. Syrian rebels kidnapped 7 Red Cross workers in Syria. The team was trying to return to Damascus after a mid-mission. The Red Crescent workers were kidnapped today just outside northern town. And of course they'll be used for ransom money by the Western-backed rebels. Assad makes a funny, I deserve the Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, terrible things continue happening in Syria, which are caused by the West. So, that Bashar al-Assad sure is a kidder when asked today to comment on the Nobel Peace Prize, which was awarded to the UN group currently working to dismantle his chemical weapons arsenal. The Syrian ruler quipped that it should have been mine. The comment came in an interview with the pro-Syrian Lebanese newspaper, who wrote that he said it jokingly, get it? the jokes that Assad is a war criminal. So this is your typical crap in the news that you'll see. It's like I said before, either they have weapons that they're able to use to defend themselves, and that's why they get their chemical weapons, or they volunteered to do it, or they were put in checkmate by the West, and including Russia, to give up weapons that they supposedly used against their people when they didn't. So, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory that, you know, people like Obama or Bush, whatever, can be considered war criminals. Blair, I mean, he actually did what they wanted him to do, right? And that's still not good enough, apparently. And as far as the UN group, they didn't give a shit about chemical attacks before, and every time they did try to go in there, they were aided by the Syrian government, this war criminal, and tried to give them protection, but they were fired at, they were kidnapped, the UN workers, and they weren't allowed to go in there. And then, of course, when the UN tried to go in there, or they wanted to go in there and inspect, you know, these chemical attacks by the rebels, they said that they wanted to be able to get access to the entire country. So they're, you know, they wanted to be able to blame it on him, and he said no, of course. So they're really scummy type of organization, the UN. I wouldn't depend on them for anything. These comments. Apparently, it's easy to be an ass in public as in private. George W. Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld are all war criminals too, but they have the good taste not to make jokes about it. And I think they have made jokes. At least Bush has. Apparently, it's easy. Yeah. So Assad for the Peace Prize actually makes sense, a certain amount of sense, when the gas fog rises and everything is still and quiet. I imagine it's pretty peaceful. A Polish town tears down statue marking the rape of millions of German women by Russian soldiers. It says here that the statue called Whatever Frau appeared on Saturday. The artist is a student at the Fine Arts. He said he felt compelled to create the sculpture after reading about Red Army soldiers raping millions of women between 1944 and 1945. The statue has been removed by authorities. So there's a documentary called Hellstorm, or at least there's a book called Hellstorm. You can find it on YouTube somewhere, I think Renegade Broadcasting. And I don't know how this guy was able to be able to put this together emotionally. Just the accounts of the amount of rapes of German women by the Russians, and how they were actually instructed to do it. Just rape them to death. So a sex jihad of Tunisian girl in Syria. They promised me paradise, so I gave myself to 152 men. When she arrived, she was basically married, immediately divorced. She married one of the leaders of whatever, whom she divorced to marry another jihadist, and another, a total of 152 husbands. About these tolerant people, these LGBT people. Girl harassed in school bathroom by transgender student told his rights trump their privacy. Girls have complained about the transgender students' harassment of them in bathrooms. The girls have been threatened with removal from sports teams and hate crime charges. The rights of transgendered Colorado high school student are being put ahead of girls the boy harasses in the girls' bathroom. Wow. A male student who claims to be transgender has caused controversy by harassing female students in the girls' room, but will not face any discipline despite vocal protests from the girls' parents. Students are being threatened with removal from sports teams or even hate crime charges if they continue to voice their concerns. The girls even gave out some or most of their restrooms in order to accommodate their transgender classmate. So the response outraged parents, and the Pacific Justice Institute, a civil rights group, who wrote a letter to the school demanding explanation, saying, "We're not going to stand by and let 99.7% of the students lose their privacy and free speech rights just because 0.3% of the population are gender confused." And lastly, Australian March for Babies turns violent. A U.S. pro-life activist and MP is assaulted by a pro-abortion mob. A pro-life member of parliament told the press she was belted in the head and pelted with eggs. Also, they said that they saw the public literally mugging people on the streets. We had people being assaulted, kicked, stomped on as they sat back and watched. When the pro-life activists tried to start the march, they were blocked by a mob of 200 pro-abortion protesters, so they all sat and protested and started praying. Then the police let them start attacking us. They said as we got to the stage, the pro-abortion protesters took our stage and started stealing banners and signs. That's when I was knocked to the ground and kicked and stepped on. They said the police were basically useless. So there you go. There's your tolerance. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.